this is just more on the hypnotic interview in detail. Then I'm going to do unconscious moments in detail as well. The purpose of the investigation is to understand what the problem really is. That's really what it comes down to. We're just asking questions about the problem. In so doing, we are going to invite that retrieval of subconsciousness. So I talked about this a few minutes ago. That's what fractionation is. The very fact of retrieving information creates a fractionation. When you overload that retrieval, or not even necessarily overload it, but do it consistently, that fractionation becomes dependable. And so as you get the client to go back and forth in this information retrieval, that very fact is what allows for trance. The other thing that occurs inside of that fractionation is that the knots in the problem come out. As you saw in that very first demo, which was amazing, by the way, because we were just starting and he already covered the whole, lesson. But, what we found is one knot leads to another, right? One issue dovetails into another issue. The only way to find out how that dovetailing occurs in a given individual is to let them continue on with that retrieval process. So it's like, oh, and that made me think of my mom and the TV. And that made me think of the feeling of not being heard. And that made me think of how it felt to go back, to my room. And that's what, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later, my family, my siblings and I are still experiencing. And that's about the Catholics somehow. And then he said, and I'm really confused because I don't even, see how these all connect at some point. And that's the way the knot is actually creating a problem in his own head. That's why it's a problem, because it's like, and the Catholics, and my mom, and that feeling, and I feel helpless right now. And so what we're allowing for that fractionation is to visit this knot, undo this one. And they lead one into another. And we could have gone on with Philip, by the way. Like, that wasn't a full session to me. There was more we could have said and done. But we dealt with that initial piece of it. Each knot that is untied slowly breaks down the overall problem. So like you can even feel it now, like you guys can all feel with your intuition. Philip's problem is looser now. Like when he started, it felt like this. And now that we've, stretched it, like pulling at his, I was going to say underwear. Isn't there an expression about pulling your underwear? Now that we've stretched it, he feels more spacious inside of it. That's all we're trying to do for the clients is free them from that negative position of thinking, oh, I have a problem and it's insoluble. So like even just the small amount that we did with him now already gives him quite a bit of play and quite a bit of stretch where he didn't have that elasticity before. And that's enough in itself to lead him to his next solution or to whatever he needs to do next. So the investigation, all it does is meet the client at the problem, not at a predicted technique. Not at, oh, I think Philip needs a regression. Because for all I know, he wouldn't have had one. That was just something he happened to bring up. Not, oh, if I give him a language pattern that he can use every time he gets triggered, it'll undo the whole issue. I don't want to make any of those kinds of assumptions. So the questions create momentum inside of the problem and make it malleable so that we can start to nudge the client. And actually, the correct term should have been so they can nudge themselves. The one thing I don't do, and that I would like for you to avoid completely, is solution-based questions. So anything to the effect of what could you do about that? Or what would be the correction to that kind of behavior? Anything that's technical, somebody says like, I want to lose weight. So you say to them like, well, have you managed your nutrition? They go, duh. Like, obviously that's not going to help because they're not stupid. Like they thought of that. It didn't work. Well, do you go to the gym? Like, they're going to be so triggered by you asking that. That's exactly what elicits their psychotic insight. They're like, fuck you, bitch. Of course I've been to the gym. That doesn't help at all, right? Like, that's not my issue. So any solution-based questions trigger psychotic insight. Any solution-based questions also detract from the subconscious mind. So it's just not our purpose, not the point of what we're doing. So instead, what the problems really what the questions always need to do is dig into the problem. And if you can't figure out which way to dig into it, dig in a different way. Go from a whole different perspective. The reason I gave you the cheat sheet manual, I really don't want you to read questions off of a text, okay? Like that's the whole point of this course, is to have a script-free approach. But there are ideas there for new ways to approach problems. So it's totally fine to look at them to get ideas. I study those questions so that they're just like in my mind. So why we're using the hypnotic interview is, as I've said already, we're not using a script, we're not using preparation, we're not using a specific technique, because then we're working on a symptom. The symptom is not the problem. Philip having this fight with his sister is not the problem. The problem is the feeling that it gave him inside and the person he wanted to be instead of that. The fight is not the issue. So the Western correction model is really oriented towards erasing symptoms. Like CBT is a coping mechanism, so your behavior changes. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, it's cool to change your behavior, but it doesn't solve the problem. So it doesn't give you the feeling of freedom. That's what we're going for here, is to actually give you the feeling of freedom so that you can get in touch with the next level of you. And by the way, that's a very important piece that I'm going to talk about on day 3, is as you get into the subconscious, you feel a sense of your possibilities. So the better you become as a practitioner in this, the more hopeful and excited the clients become, because they're in touch with a part of themselves that they didn't even know how to access before. So that's a huge reason why symptom erasure doesn't work, because the symptom going away or the behavior changing doesn't necessarily give the client insight into their, whatever you want to call it, higher self or possibilities. Number 2, hypnotic suggestions, language patterns, confusion techniques is too much for you to work with. Like, bottom line is, as long as you're working on your own memory and like, what paper do I need? What highlighter do I need? Where's my pen? What do I need to say next? You are missing the client. They're right there in front of you. They have everything you need to fix the problem right there in front of you. So if you are involved with your own prep and your own idea of what you want to do, you are thinking about something that's not allowing your full attention to be on their subconscious. So that's a huge piece of this, is just like letting go of that interruption of your own preparation, which is so annoying, because like, what does my education cost me? Like over $250,000? Like, it's a lot of fucking money, right? And to say like, oh, that's interrupting my subconscious, there's a problem there, just on our societal level. But that's the truth, is like, if I'm going to use my subconscious to work with their subconscious, I can't be thinking my thoughts in the middle. I can't be thinking my education in the middle. It has to be in the background. All the stuff that we're used to giving people, homework, audios, write in your journal. Again, same problem. Clients don't really like it. It doesn't really work. It's a repeated model from childhood. Oh, if I work on this more, I'll get more. Like, that's just not true when it comes to the subconscious. The subconscious does not make you earn anything. The subconscious does not make you have to work to access it. It's right there. It's very readily available. And so if we interrupt it all the time with, oh, and don't forget to listen to your audio for 30 minutes every night, and don't forget to do your homework. Again, we're interrupting that process. And by the way, I'm not trying to say those things are bad. Like, as I keep telling you, I have tons of education. I'm very proud of it. It's gotten me, a lot of wonderful things in my life. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not what this method is. Why else are we using the interview instead of the usual? All this thing with tons of sessions, tons of hours, packages, programs. It's again hung up on the idea that we're going to work with symptoms. Like, oh, it takes a long time to quit smoking. Oh, it takes a long time to lose weight. That's not true. Actually, it's negative hypnosis to tell people, oh, it's going to take a long time. Because then what does their mind do is stretch the problem. There's a huge problem that we have in the regular therapy model. Is like, oh yeah, I'm gonna need to see you for 3 years. I mean, fucking regular, Freudian therapy is like decades long, literally. Like, I'll see you forever. It's not good hypnosis because the person just never thinks of themselves as free of the problem. So we're getting away from that model by using the hypnotic interview, which goes straight to the reason the symptoms are there. That cuts out the need for multiple sessions. We're also programmed to think we need to do all kinds of things like build rapport. Hi, how's it going? Where did you park? How is your drive over here? What are you going to do, for the weekend? How are you feeling today? I love your sweater. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that stuff, but it's not going to solve anyone's problems. You don't need to do all that stuff. You're not getting paid for that. All the suggestibility test, relaxing people, it's not solving problems. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to sell relaxation, knock yourself out. I'm not saying I don't ever buy that or do it for people. I do. But it's not what this product is. This product is about problem solving. So cut all that other stuff out because it's interrupting you. I also don't do too much explaining about what is hypnosis, what is not hypnosis. I mean, the clients don't really care. They just want the problem to go away. If somebody does care, I'm not saying I would withhold a conversation with them. I would take the opportunity. But 99% of the time, we're explaining something that nobody gives a fuck about. So we're just taking them through something they don't want to know. And we've all been taught, like, oh, deepener, suggestibility test, proving people that they're hypnotizable. They don't want to be proven that. They just want the problem gone. So just go for that. Just get the problems to go away. I said this before. Somebody asked me about, did I ask the wrong question or something? There are no wrong questions. All questions lead to the same place. There's only one way through a person's subconscious, and that's their way. They know what that way is. There's no way that you can not get there because that's the way that is inbuilt into their subconscious. It's just a question of how fast. So right questions really just mean get my job done quicker. If you put yourself in the mentality of thinking, I need to go faster, you're going to slow yourself down. So there's no point in thinking about what the right question is because there's no gain from that. Actually, saying the least amount is the easiest. I will say my form of conversational hypnosis is chatty compared to some people. So if you want to really work on the reductionistic view of it, say the least amount of words possible and wait. This part in purple, I would say, is extremely important. And it's very Ericksonian. Remember, I talk about Erickson at the start, the great-grandfather of hypnosis. Erickson was known for saying the rude thing or being the jackass, or being sexist. In fact, a lot of what he said, wouldn't fly in the world today. There would be a lawsuit or something. But what we learned from that is you do have to be willing to go out on a limb. Like, did you guys notice how I went out on a limb with Philip when I said something like, so you're acting like the Catholics? And then he laughed, right? He had this big belly laugh, and it was so genuine and so authentic. But like, that's a borderline offensive comment that I made. Because first of all, he's not like the Catholics. And second of all, that was the whole point of what he was saying was they fucked up my family, and then I'm fucked up because of that. And then I said, oh, but so you're acting that way. And that's like right there on the border of being like, oh, fuck, that's rude. But also, I said it in a loving way and in a way that was obviously meant to show how human we all are, right? And to show him like, of course you picked up on that thing that, you've rejected. And of course, that's the thing that's triggering you right now. And I have so much compassion for that because I have the same issues, right? So ask the thing no one will say because it will help the person to get real, right? Like I have a famous story about a lady who has a narcissistic husband. She's one of my stories I like to tell a lot because I have worked, in my own life with narcissism, and I'm very sensitive to it. And I'm very easily triggered by that, relationship. And so I have a strong opinion on it. But her view of her relationship is it works for her and she's willing to deal with the things that come with it. And so I had to be willing to test her out on that. Are you really willing to put up with this? Are you really willing to deal with that? And that's not something most people are willing to do. But at the end of the day, her answers come out to this is the best decision for me. And sure, I mean, I will say she's very happy. Like her life turned out very well for her, the way she wants it. You have to be willing to say that thing. If you're not willing to do that, get another job because it's really essential. The lock represents the fact that all problems are inaccessible to the subject. So if the client's problem exists in their subconscious, which is inaccessible to them and to their conscious mind, when they start talking about the problem, they're just guessing. This is a theory, it's a conjecture. And have you ever noticed how children do this? Like one kid will push another kid on the playground, and then a third kid will run up to you and say, oh, I know exactly what happened. This person did this, and that's who's to blame. Right? Like instantly they have a whole explanation of the whole thing. They might have seen it wrong. They might have caught it, from an angle. They might like one person more than another and they have a bias, but they think they have the answer and they'll tell it to you like matter-of-factly. Well, that's how we deal with our problems. We're like, and this is what happened to me, and this is why I have the problem. This is my problem. And we really think that's the thing. And then we go and say, and I would like to pay you to solve that. And then what happens is the therapist or the hypnotist or the coach or whatever takes that seriously and starts there and takes that at face value. But the client really doesn't know what the issue is. That's why they hired you. That's why they got to the point of saying, hey, I think I'll come to a hypnotist. So when you ask them at the beginning, what's the problem? They're not going to know. What they're going to say is some venting, which is what Philip did. They're going to give you their emotions that they're aware of, their feelings, disassociated information, conclusions, complaints, guesses, examples. That's what you'll hear first. Now you have heard the client's best guess. Do not try to help them based on their best guess, because that doesn't make any sense. You're speaking to their subconscious mind and they're talking with their conscious mind, and now you're going to respond to that. Don't do that. Instead, we're going to take the symptomatic information and basically disregard it. The usual thing to do would be to take it and attach a therapeutic strategy to it. And now we're using a therapeutic strategy on a guess. So it's a guess on a guess. So I want you to not do that. The picture here is those guys, who put the gas in the car and take the tires off, the pit stop guys. And that's how I think most therapists think of their work. They're like, okay, if I do this and this and this and this and this changes, then everything will be fixed, right? But that doesn't work at all, because it triggers all of their psychotic insight and then all of their resistance, and then nothing changes. So I want you to just not reach out to help. And in fact, I'm even going to tell you to not care. I really don't care if the clients have a breakthrough. And that sounds kind of callous, right? And mean, but it's true, because even caring triggers psychotic insight. Isn't it true that you can tell if somebody is invested in your change? You can tell, like the way parents are, right? Oh, It's so annoying. Like, oh, it gives me an ick feeling. If you feel that relationship with your clients, it will trigger their psychotic insight. I'm not saying not to be a kind, warm person. I'm not saying that obviously you do this job because you care about people. Like that's a given, right? I'm not saying that we're assholes. But in the case of each particular client, we really don't care about the outcome because they're going to come to their outcome the way they're going to come to it, whether I care or not. So if I step out of it, it's better for them. If I feel pressure, they feel pressure. So if I feel pressure, it means that I think something should happen. That's again triggering the psychotic insight. As soon as they feel like I'm expecting something, I think we should be somewhere, I would like them to follow me, come with me, come in my direction, that triggers a psychotic insight. So I don't feel pressure to go anywhere because if I feel that, I'm leading them. Therefore, we kind of just trash a lot of stuff. Trash all of our ideas about therapy, giving advice, creating suggestions, creating affirmations, any of the hierarchy involved with coaching and life. And the last one is the hardest because you think because you got paid, you're in the higher in the hierarchy. Like that's kind of the implicit assumption of charging to help people. But that's not true. In this model, that is not what's occurring. Because if you consider your position as in some way instructional or in some way, more powerful, it triggers a psychotic insight. So you really have to be like just about as regular as possible. Just yourself. Nothing put on, nothing fake about it. This is an old idea, this whole thing of curiosity. It comes from, Platonic times. That's what I studied in my education, my higher education. The whole Platonic premise is ask so many questions until the person is paralyzed by questions. That's what creates trance. So the process is look for conscious information, look for unconscious information. If you're wondering, how do I do that? I'm about to tell you that's the next module. So we're going to get to that. But that's the very first step. Is this a conscious response or an unconscious response? Based on the unconscious response, what's going on? Now I can isolate more of the problem. As we go down that road of what's unconscious and what's a knot that needs to be untied, we can untie one at a time until the whole sweater comes apart. That's kind of how I think of it. It's like the problem is a sweater. Each knot comes out one at a time until that last one where you pull it and you're like, oh, it's all thread. That's how problems come undone. But we have to follow that unconscious piece until that knot comes out. Have you ever noticed how children do this naturally? Right? Like you put a kid in a forest or a playground, and that's exactly what they do. I wonder what this is. I wonder what this is. I wonder what this does. Mom, what's this? Like that's their natural way of getting through problems, is to ask. They're inquisitive because that's what they're doing is they're coming through life like, oh, one thing at a time, one thing at a time, one thing at a time. It's just that we've forgotten how to do that as adults because we've assumed that we know something, but we don't. We know nothing. So the end of that questioning cycle, when you've asked so many things that the person is like, I don't know. Whoa. Like often I get to the end of the session, the client says, what problem? Like I can't even remember it. That's the stingray effect, where the person is just like stung. That's exactly what Plato called it in the Socratic dialogues. So it's a combination of confusion, deepening the confusion, overloading the subconscious, allowing it to induce itself into trance. That's what creates the stingray effect. I don't have to do anything except for ask questions the way Socrates did.